Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back up front when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
Hello and welcome to a new podcast, The Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
Hi there, I am back with horse racing today. I'm joined by John Gorton, a former classic winning jockey who is now the director of a racing club in Borneo. How are you today, John, in Borneo?
I'm very well, thank you, Stephen. It's good to speak to you. Yes, very good.
What's the weather like in Borneo?
Always the same. Very warm, never cold, rains a lot. But yes, all you need here is an umbrella. That's all. You don't need a jersey or gloves or anything. Nothing.
Well, we've had quite a bit of rain here lately, but not quite the same temperature. But
correct.
On the classic theme, I think you won the Oaks in England and South Africa, the Austrian Derby, and St. Ledgers in Germany and Norway. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. And and as a trainer, I won the South African Oaks twice.
Well, you've certainly been a globetrotter all your life. Now, I wanted to ask you about your current role as the director of this racing club at the Royal Sabah Turf Club. What jobs do you get in this role?
Well, I sort of overlook almost everything. I dope test the jockeys. I do the testing of the horses on the bloods. I advise the stewards on the running of races, and if there's a jockey who caused interference or I didn't think was trying, so I do everything, a lot of things. Anyway, I help on the track. I advise jockeys and trainers if they need help in any way. I do a lot of things here, all to do with horse racing.
So they're long days at the races then?
On race day, yes. Because I also spin the bloods at night after racing to get the serum up, because we have to then send the bloods to the lab in Penang the next day. So I am busy. Yes, but it's good. I love it. The at this stage of my life, it's very good for me. Very good, and I can help people. A lot of trainers, a lot of jockeys. I can tell jockeys what they do wrong, and yes, it suits me very well.
Well, let's go back a bit now. You were born in Johannesburg on the 5th of June, 1946. You've got a birthday soon. You came from a racing family. Your father was a trainer. How old were you when you sat on your first horse or pony?
About 14 and a half. But by the time I became an apprentice, I was 15. And I was apprenticed at the South African Jockey Academy. I was one of the first to go to the academy. My father was a good trainer, but he always wanted to go for the big kills, so to speak. And he was warned off for a year, and that actually changed my life, because I was up for grabs, so to speak, and two people applied for me, and one was Fred Rickaby, and they drew it out of a hat, and I went to Fred Rickaby, which changed my life. He was a very good trainer, and he trained for a sugar baron who unfortunately died recently, a man called Chris Sanders. And Chris Sanders said to me, even though I was only an apprentice, he said I could be stable jockey, and if I matriculated and if I was champion apprentice, he'd send me to England, which I did. I did both of those things, and I actually went to England in 1966, and I spent not very long, about 2 months, 3 months, about 3 months, and I rode out for Sir Noel Merlis, and I rode my first winner at Yarmouth on Nelian for Noel Merlis. It was a wonderful experience, and in all of that, Noel Merlis must have thought I got on well with fillies, because he put me on a filly called Abbeyfield, and Abbeyfield was an absolute bitch. She was a bitch, and I had to ride her every day, and I'd go there and I'd have a look on the board, Gorton, Abbeyfield. Oh, anyway, he then one day, Noel Merlis came to me and he said, John, he said, would you like to ride Abbeyfield at Newmarket? And I said, oh, yes, Mr. Merlis, I'd love to. And Leicester had ridden Abbeyfield the time before as hot favourite. And as I said, she was a right bitch. Anyway, she got left. And in those days, they were still using the old tape. And Leicester missed the start on her, and she lost all chance and was nowhere, and she was hot favourite. But I was very good in South Africa using the old barriers. We hadn't started. We were also using the old tape, and at those days we weren't using starting gates, and I was very good at out of the gates. Anyway, I rode and I got her away, and she won at Newmarket. So yeah, wonderful. I mean, in that sort of 6-week period that I was actually riding, I rode, I can't remember the name of the horse. Dick Hearn put me on a second string horse at Newmarket. It was a 7-furlong race. I forget what it was called, and it was pouring with rain. And I was very good out the barriers, and there's the starter with these bowler hats and everything, and they were all lined up. We're ready to go, and nobody went forward. They're all hanging back, but of course I didn't know. I went like hell straight into the thing, and the gates went up slowly because of the weight of the water, and I ducked down, and the top of the tape caught the top of my skull cap and pulled it on the back of my head. But I got about an 8 or 10 lengths break on the field and won. Of course, I didn't ride the horse the next time. Joe rode it and won again.
Just taking you back a bit, John, you didn't mention that in South Africa you were the champion apprentice in 1964, 1965 and 1966, and you were champion jockey in 1967. So you must have gone, after this period riding in the UK in 1966, you must have then gone back to South Africa in 1967. Yes,
correct. And I had been away for 4 months, and I came back in the December, and I won everything after that, and was champion jockey. When I left, I'd ridden 4 winners, and I think when I returned, the leading riders were, I don't know, 30, 35 winners. We remember that we only raced once a week then, and occasionally on a Wednesday, but it was generally once a week racing.
And then you came back to the UK in 1969 to ride for Lord Rosebery. How did that move come about to be appointed as his sort of stable jockey?
In late 68, I received a letter from Sir Jack Jarvis asking me would I be interested in being number 1 jockey for Park Lodge. And of course, I naturally accepted. I got very excited and said yes, and I accepted. And then Sir Jack Jarvis used to always, every winter, he'd take the Union Castle ship and go to Cape Town, and he'd spent, and on this particular year, he was apparently leaving to go to Southampton to get on the ship, and he died. I'm not sure what he died of, whether it was a heart attack but anyway, he died. And when I heard this, of course, my world fell apart. And I thought, oh, now what do I do? And lo and behold, I received a telegram from Lord Rosebery to say that everything's remained the same. So I was very happy, very pleased and relieved, because I'd already told Fred Rickaby and Chris Sanders that I would be leaving their stable, and because I was going to England.
That must have been a big decision to come over to the UK. You had no doubt about coming, though.
No doubt at all. England, when I first left South Africa to go and ride in England and rode for Sir Noel Merlis and spent that short period of time there, when I returned to South Africa, my whole idea of the racing had changed. Before I left to go to England, Greyville Racecourse and Clarewood Racecourse, it was so big and so daunting and all those sort of things. But when I came back from the UK, it suddenly wasn't daunting anymore. It was it wasn't as good as the UK, and because of that, I rode with a lot more confidence, utmost confidence, because I'd experienced something better. Well, I considered better at that stage anyway, and it made me a better jockey because I rode with greater confidence, and it wasn't sort of, I have to win this. It was, your whole thinking was different. You'd go out and say, oh, yeah, I'll win this. That was the difference. Whereas before I'd say, oh, I have to win it. This time it was, oh, I'll win it anyway. It was your thinking on that made the difference.
And it must have been fantastic to be riding the Primrose with rose hoops and cap for Lord Rosebery.
Well, it was. And do you know that when I started racing in Australia, I used Lord Rosebery's colours. Those are my colours I used, Primrose and Rose. And of course, in Australia, it was pink and yellow, but it was Primrose and Rose. Yeah, those are the colours I used, and those were my colours in Australia.
Well, you made an immediate impact, because on the 7th of June, you won the Oaks on Sleeping Partner to become the first South African to win a British Classic. What a start for your career in England. It
was. And of course, the other thing about it is that by riding on all these different race courses, left hand, right hand, the variety, of course, take a race course like Brighton, where you run along the top of a hill, down a hill, up, it's so different. There's no other racing country in the world has the variety of tracks that the UK has, and I think that makes for better jockeys, because you have to be able to use the whip in both hands, and it makes you a better rider, better jockey. Whereas you can go to America and they're all left-handed, everything's left-handed. I like the different variety that you had in the UK.
And that same year in 1969, you won races at Royal Ascot.
I won the Jersey Stakes on Crooner. That was yes. And then, of course, I won the Riversdale on Sleeping Partner. And a year or two later, I won the Coronation Stakes on Jacinth. Yes, she was a great mare, Jacinth. She was probably the best horse I ever rode. I rode some good horses. I was lucky. She should have won the Guineas. She ran second. She was short of a run. But besides that, she was very good indeed. In fact, one race at Goodwood, she was on her wrong leg. She ran second to was it Thatch? I can't remember. And she was on her wrong leg. And I came back and I said to Bruce Hobbs, I said, Governor, she was on her wrong leg. And I thought, he must have thought, oh, what are you talking about? Because she jumped from one, which was down, it was a mile race. And she jumped from the one, and Leicester won it on, I think it was Thatch. And he drew 9, and he was up on the right hand. Anyway, she was so good that she ran second on her wrong leg, and I couldn't get her to change. I knew she was on her wrong leg. And 2 weeks later, on the same track, and this time I drew 9, she was on her right leg, and she won by 6 lengths and ran a faster time than Thatch.
Well, as you say, I was going to mention Jacinth because she was the leading 2-year-old of 1972.
Yes.
Trained by Bruce Hobbs, who was very well known for training fillies. And you also won the Coronation Stakes, as you mentioned, in 1973, and the Falmouth Stakes in 1973 at Newmarket.
That's right.
What was it like, you, as well as riding for Doug Smith, as I say, you rode for Bruce Hobbs at Palace House Stables, where the National Horse Racing Museum is now. What was it like riding for him, Bruce Hobbs, and working at Palace House Stables?
It actually worked out very well because I had 2 retainers. My first retainer was for Lord Rosebery, so I would go and ride on certain days for him, and then they had an arrangement that I would go on the other day or 2 for Bruce Hobbs in the mornings. You know, I'm talking about the track work, but obviously because of 2 retainers, Lord Rosebery had first call on me. But Doug Smith and Lord Rosebery parted at the end of 1969. Bruce Hobbs became his trainer. Well, that actually suited me personally very well because I had the 2 retainers were for the same, were in the 1 yard, so it made it easier. It was easy, and it was a good relationship. I was there for 6 years for Lord Rosebery. He was wonderful, wonderful.
And what was it like working at Palace House Stables?
Good. Bruce Hobbs was he was a hard taskmaster, but I think he was fair and he was a good trainer. Yeah, I had a lot of success with him. I always did I always try to do what he said he would like me to do. The only time I actually ever disobeyed him was I won the Cheveley Park on Jacinth, and of course I rode Cry of Truth, and I'd ridden Cry of Truth at her first start, and she won at Doncaster 9:20 one night. Bruce Hobbs wasn't there that night, and the ground was bottomless, and she skated through it. She won by 4 lengths. I never let her go, and the ground was bottomless. Anyway, it came to the Cheveley Park, and Dick Radcliffe was a racing man, and he said to me, your governor's very worried about the track because they'd had an awful lot of rain. It was still raining in the morning. And he said to me, he told me that you're going to have to hold her up and see it. And I didn't say anything. I thought, I'm not doing that. And we went in the barriers and the gates opened and I let her rip and she went clear, probably 5, 6, 7 lengths clear. And then I just dropped over her neck because, Leicester was a great jockey, and Leicester, when you watched him ride in a lot of the races, especially if the horse was in front, he would crouch over the neck and just give the reins away, and the horse would have no pressure on the mouth. And the horse would automatically slow up in front. And this is exactly what happened with Cry of Truth. I was well clear, and I just sat forward and gave her, and her ears were pricked. So if a horse's race is in a race and their ears are pricked in front watching, means they're doing it easy. And of course we got into the bottom of the dip, and that it was heavy. And of course I'd had this big break, and Freddie Head rode a horse from France, I can't remember its name, and it came from the clouds and it run second. I won 2 lengths, but if I had have held the horse up, I think I would have got beat. I don't think I would have won. So that was the only time I actually ever disobeyed Bruce Hobbs's orders. Yeah.
Well, among your other victories during your time in the UK, you won the Gordon Stakes, you won the Goodwood Cup, and you won the Lancashire Oaks. But you returned to South Africa in 1974 to start training. Had you always intended to go back as soon as that to start training?
No, I hadn't. I was asked to see Harry Oppenheimer in London, and I went to see him thinking that he wanted me to be his jockey, and he asked me to be his trainer, which really surprised me. But you see, I was only in the UK on a work permit, so as soon as the racing ended, even though I owned 2 motor cars and a house and everything, I still had to get out of England for the end of the racing season and could only return at the start of the new season. So, yeah, it hadn't planned the way I hadn't planned that to happen. But anyway, it's all water under the bridge now. It's been a very interesting, very different life.
Well, you've certainly travelled the globe training, but you were quite young to start training.
Yes, I was. It wasn't what I'd planned. I won the South African Oaks twice. I won the UTA handicap, and I won some Transvaal handicap. I won a few good handicaps. But the negative was that Harry Oppenheimer's main stallion was a horse called Rubafilio, who ran second, I think it was in the Ledger. He was a Rebo horse, but a lot of the Oppenheimer mares were by Free Ride, a French horse. And I don't think, it's always easy afterwards. You didn't know at the time, but I don't think the mares suited, and he wasn't a particularly good stallion. So the winners weren't as good as they had hoped. I was there 5 years, and then I decided that it was South Africa also, things were not crash hot. And anyway, we had no children, so we decided to emigrate. So we went to Australia. And Australia...
Did you miss the riding, though? Did you miss the riding?
Yes, I did. I think that riding in the UK was very hard to surpass, especially if you were lucky and you had success. I think, like anything, Stephen, if you're not doing very well, it's a tough life. It's a tough life being a jockey if you're down the bottom of the list somewhere. But if you're successful, it's a winning good races that you plan and work out, and you win. It's a buzz you can't buy.
Well, you were regularly riding over 50 winners a season in the UK, and as you say, after South Africa training, you then went to Australia, and you started there in Perth, I think.
Yes, I was in Perth. I did well, but Perth was a tough place, and there was the rocket racer incident, and I thought, this is gangster stuff. And anyway, I actually met Lord Chelsea in Perth, and he, in the street one day, I was so surprised. I didn't know, but he owned a farming property south of Perth. Anyway, I said to him, I said, "Oh, it's good to see you, Lord Chelsea," and blah, blah, blah. And we were speaking, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm moving actually to Brisbane. And he said, "Oh, good." He said, "I'll have horses with you then," which is what he did. And I trained for him successfully in Brisbane for, I don't know, a long time. And we had a wonderful time. He used to come out and spend the English winter with us. And we'd go to Badara Island and Lizard Island, and wonderful, wonderful. Anyway, and there was one story I will tell you about Lord Chelsea. Lord Chelsea he's now Lord Cadogan, but in those days he was Lord Chelsea. And I had a horse, his name was Glenlochan, big grey horse. And I ran him in the Brisbane Cup, a 2-mile race, and they start from the 1,200 meter mark and go, 300 meters, and they turn left. Anyway, there were 2 fallers in the race, and they fell right in front of him, and he hurdled them, and he ran 4th. He wouldn't have won, but he would have run 2nd. So I phoned Lord Chelsea, and I said, listen, I said, he ran 4th, but I said, that horse is a natural hurdler. I said, they fell right in front of me, and he cleared them and recovered. And anyway, so we organized to send him to the UK. Anyway, the horse was in training with Henrietta Knight, and I came over and rode in a retired jockey's race at Ascot. And I rode one for Dick Hearn and ran 2nd. I forget his name. So, of course, I was staying with Lord Chelsea, and we went to dinner and, a lot to drink and all the rest of it. And he said to me just before going to bed, he said, oh, incidentally, he said, tomorrow you're riding a gallop. What? He said, yes. He said, you got to gallop Glenlochan. Oh, and I was full of alcohol. Anyway, I didn't feel very good the next morning. Anyway, I went out on the road, him big, strong grey horse, and we galloped him. And Lord Chelsea said, well, will he win? And I said, no, my lord, I don't think he will. But I said, I think he'll run well. But I said, after that, he'll win. And exactly what I said, he ran 4th at, I'm not sure where. And then he won 3 straight. And one of them was at Sandown. He won a race by 12 lengths. And on the night before he ran, it poured with rain. And Henrietta Knight called me in Australia, and she said, John, she said, I think I should tell Charles to scratch him. It's going to be bottomless. What do you think? I said, run. I said, you'll win. You won by 12 lengths. Anyway, and he unfortunately died. He broke a hip in an accident. They had snow and couldn't get out the box and all that. But and that was Lord Chelsea's horse. And I bought him in New Zealand, and he was by 3 legs out of La Bruaya. How I remember this, I don't know. And he was called Glenlochan because of the La Bruaya, the hedges that they have up at Glenlochan. Yeah. So a wonderful story. Oh, when I think about it. Oh.
Yeah, and after that you went to China. How did you finish up training in China? That must have been different.
China was a trainer's paradise. I had 55 horses. I ran the apprentice school. I won the first 2 million RMB, a race called the Blue Diamond Stakes. It was a trainer's paradise. Oh, and everything was paid, and you went to the races, and you had one groom for 2 horses. It was wonderful until the government closed it down. There was no gambling, of course, but everybody was gambling, and the race course was wonderful. And the winters are cold, and the ice and all that, and they had these 2 big race tracks, the A grass and the B grass, and they would cover it in the winter with plastic covering and have a sprinkler, and the sprinkler would go around, and they would take the plastic mesh away, the plastic covering away about 2 weeks before racing, and it would just be green, absolutely glorious. Yeah, it was wonderful racing, wonderful. And of course there was no stands. They had 12 rooms, and each room had 12 rooms. So it was a big room, and they each had 12 with all betting terminals and people, and it was jam-packed, and there was no advertising.
Well, you certainly lived a very varied life and travelled all around the world. Are your roots now in Borneo?
Yes, if possible. The life here, the life is very good. As long as my health is good, I'd like to stay here. Yes, it's simple. The track's good. The track's almost on a par with Kranji It's almost an exact replica of Kranji Racecourse in Singapore. Yeah, the lifestyle is very good. The weather's nice and it's not cold and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's been a very interesting life. It's a very different life, you know. And I'm blessed that I was given the opportunity to ride for somebody like Lord Rosebery, you know, wonderful. And some of Lord Rosebery's owners, you know, Tom Blackwell, he was the head. I won the Chester Vase on Jupiter Pluvius. He was a good horse, and we fancied him for the Derby, but he had to have soft ground, and of course it never rained, and Epsom can get pretty hard, and so we never ran him. But yeah, and the villas, Tony and Claire Villa, I was very fortunate for them. I rode Take a Reef and I won the Extel Stakes for them, and you know, he had some wonderful owners, Bruce Hobbs, and we were successful. It was wonderful times, wonderful.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on the Paddock and the Pavilion. You've mentioned there at the Derby at the end, and we're looking forward in a short period of time to the Kazoo Derby and the Kazoo Oaks, a race, of course, that you won back in 1969. Thank you very much for being with me, John.
Thank you, Stephen. Wonderful to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Paddock and the Pavilion. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and now on Instagram at the Pad and Pav. Don't forget, if you like the show, please do leave us a rating and review.
Sports Social Podcast Network.